The courtroom was filled with laughter. Judge Mortimer Henshaw, an old, grumpy man with thick glasses perched on his nose, had just slammed his gavel down. He pointed at the young woman standing at the defense table. "Young lady, this is a court of law, not a music video," he scoffed. "I don't know who let you in here, but you are making a mockery of the justice system." The crowd chuckled. The prosecutor smirked. Even the bailiff was fighting back a grin. The woman they were laughing at? Ariana Grande. Yes, that Ariana Grande. She stood there, dressed in a sleek black suit, her signature ponytail swaying as she turned her head slightly. Her face remained calm, cool, almost amused. The judge adjusted his glasses and scoffed again. "Honestly, what is this? Some kind of prank? You think because you're famous you can just waltz in here and pretend to be an attorney?" Ariana smiled. Then, she reached into her briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of documents, and placed them on the defense table with a loud thud. "Your Honor," she said sweetly, "according to the American Bar Association, I am, in fact, a licensed attorney. Here are my credentials, my law degree, and," she paused, letting the suspense build, "a signed affidavit from the state bar confirming my right to practice law in this courtroom." The laughter stopped. The judge's smirk disappeared. The prosecutor's face turned pale. The crowd? Silent. Judge Henshaw's hands trembled as he grabbed the papers. He flipped through them, his eyes scanning every word. His mouth fell open. This had to be a joke, a trick, but it wasn't. It was real. Ariana Grande was a lawyer, a real, honest-to-goodness, fully licensed attorney. The courtroom was stunned. But Ariana? She just leaned forward, rested her chin on her hand, and smiled. "Now," she said, her voice dripping with confidence, "shall we continue with the case?" It all started 2 months ago. Ariana had been living her life as usual, recording music, performing at concerts, and enjoying her career. But one evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw something that made her blood boil. A young woman, a single mother named Elena Vasquez, was being sued by a powerful billionaire. The crime? She had borrowed $20,000 from his company to pay for her daughter's medical bills. The contract was unfair, filled with hidden fees and impossible terms. And now, she owed $500,000. If she couldn't pay, she would lose everything: her home, her car, even custody of her child. Ariana's fingers tightened around her phone. She knew injustice when she saw it. She knew power-hungry men when she saw them. And she wasn't going to let this happen. She picked up the phone and called her lawyer. "I want to help," she said. Her lawyer sighed. "Ariana, you can't just show up in court and argue a case. You're not an attorney." "Then I'll become one." He laughed. "That's not how it works." But she wasn't joking. Ariana had always been smart, smarter than people gave her credit for. And what people didn't know was that she had already been studying law in secret, just for fun. Now, she had a real reason to use it. With the help of her team, she took an intense crash course in law, studied every rule and loophole, and, shockingly, passed the bar exam. It was the most difficult thing she had ever done, but when she got the letter confirming she was officially a lawyer, she knew it was worth it. Now, she was ready. She walked into the courtroom as Elena's defense attorney, ready to face the billionaire's legal team. But she didn't expect the judge himself to mock her. And she definitely didn't expect what would happen next. Just as the courtroom was still reeling from the revelation that she was, in fact, a real lawyer, the doors burst open. A tall, intimidating man in a gray suit stormed in. The billionaire. He pointed directly at Ariana. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he growled. Ariana simply tilted her head and smirked. "Neither do you." The billionaire's presence sent a wave of tension through the courtroom. The air was thick with unease. The judge, still holding Ariana's documents, looked from her to the man who had just stormed in. "Mr. Donovan," the judge muttered, recognizing him immediately. This was Victor Donovan, one of the richest, most ruthless businessmen in the country. He owned corporations, controlled politicians, and crushed anyone who stood in his way. And now, he was staring at Ariana Grande with pure hatred. Ariana, however, didn't flinch. She simply smiled and folded her arms. "Nice of you to join us, Mr. Donovan. I was just about to explain why your lawsuit is complete garbage." The courtroom gasped. The billionaire's face twisted in fury. "Garbage?" he spat. "This woman," he jabbed a finger at Elena Vasquez, who sat trembling beside Ariana. stole from my company. She signed a contract. She owes me. Ariana took a deep breath, then stepped forward. Oh, I read your contract, Mr. Donovan. And let me tell you, it is filled with illegal terms, fraud, and predatory lending tactics. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this entire operation of yours is a scam. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The judge banged his gavel. Order, he barked. Victor Donovan smirked. You think you're clever, don't you? He took slow, deliberate steps toward her. You're a pop star. A singer. You don't belong here. Ariana raised an eyebrow. Then why am I winning so far? The billionaire's nostrils flared. He turned to the judge. I demand she be removed from this case immediately. This is a joke. The judge hesitated. This was bizarre. Ariana Grande. The Ariana Grande, standing in his courtroom, defending a single mother against one of the most powerful businessmen in the world? It was unheard of. But the documents in his hands didn't lie. She was a real lawyer. Mr. Donovan, the judge said, adjusting his glasses, whether you like it or not, Ms. Grande has every legal right to represent her client. Victor's jaw clenched. His fingers twitched as if he wanted to throw something. Then, after a moment, his lips curled into a sneer. Fine, he said coldly. Then I'll crush her in court. Ariana's smirk didn't fade. Oh, I hope you try. 2 months ago, Victor Donovan had no idea who Elena Vasquez was. She was just another struggling single mother, trying to make ends meet. Then, one day, she made a desperate decision. Her 7-year-old daughter, Lucia, had been diagnosed with a rare illness. The medical bills were overwhelming. With nowhere else to turn, Elena took out a loan from Donovan Financial, one of Victor's many companies. It seemed simple at first, $20,000 to cover the surgery. But the contract was a trap. Hidden deep in the fine print were impossible conditions, astronomical interest rates, penalties for early payments, clauses that let the company take everything she owned if she missed even one deadline. And when she did, just by a single day, they pounced. Within weeks, her debt had skyrocketed to $500,000. Her house was on the verge of foreclosure. And worst of all, a legal notice arrived, stating that if she didn't pay, she could lose custody of Lucia. It was like a nightmare. She tried everything. Lawyers refused to take her case. News outlets ignored her. She had no one. Until someone unexpected showed up at her door. Ariana Grande. Elena could barely believe her eyes when the pop star stood on her porch, wearing jeans and a hoodie. Hi, Ariana had said with a warm smile. I heard about your case. I want to help. At first, Elena thought it was a joke. But when Ariana pulled out her legal credentials and started explaining the flaws in Donovan's contract, she realized this was real. Why would you do this? Elena had asked, voice trembling. Ariana's smile faded. Because people like him think they can get away with everything. And I'm here to prove them wrong. Back in the courtroom, Ariana flipped through her papers. Your Honor, she said, I would like to present evidence that Mr. Donovan's loan contracts are not just unethical, but also illegal under state law. Victor let out a laugh. Illegal? That's cute. Ariana ignored him. She turned to the judge and continued. Donovan Financial's contracts violate multiple consumer protection laws. The interest rates exceed state limits. The foreclosure clause is predatory. And worst of all, she slammed a document on the table. He intentionally hides these conditions in the fine print so that desperate people like Elena have no idea what they're really signing. The judge's eyebrows furrowed as he scanned the document. The courtroom was silent. Victor's smirk wavered. Ariana wasn't just making noise, she had evidence. I also have testimony, Ariana continued. Dozens of other victims have come forward with similar stories. And once we establish a pattern of fraud, we're not just talking about a civil case. She paused, her voice turning sharp. We're talking about criminal charges. The room gasped. Victor's face darkened. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Grande, are you suggesting that Mr. Donovan's company has engaged in widespread financial fraud? Ariana met his gaze. I'm not suggesting it, Your Honor. I'm proving it. A heavy silence filled the air. Then, bang, the double doors of the courtroom swung open with a violent force. A man in a dark suit stormed in, his expression urgent. He walked straight to Victor Donovan and whispered something in his ear. Victor stiffened. His hands curled into fists. Ariana narrowed her eyes. What was going on? Victor slowly turned back to her, and for the first time, he didn't look cocky. He looked worried. Then, without another word, he spun on his heel and walked out of the courtroom. Everyone stared in shock. Where is he going? Elena whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Ariana didn't know, but she had a very bad feeling. Something big had just happened, and whatever it wasn't over. Ariana watched as Victor Donovan stormed out of the courtroom, his shoes clicking against the polished floor. The tension was so thick it felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. Then, the judge slammed his gavel. This court is in recess for 15 minutes. We will resume once the plaintiff decides to return. Ariana turned to Elena. Are you okay? Elena was shaking. He just left? What does that mean? What's happening? Ariana glanced toward the doors. I don't know, but I intend to find out. She grabbed her briefcase, adjusted her blazer, and strode toward the exit, her heels clicking with confidence. The second she stepped into the hallway, she spotted Donovan at the far end, speaking in hushed tones with the man who had interrupted the trial. She pressed herself against the wall, listening carefully. Not now, Donovan snapped, his voice laced with fury. This case was supposed to be a formality, an easy win. No one was supposed to question it. The other man spoke urgently. Sir, the problem isn't the case. It's the investigation. Someone tipped off the Attorney General's office. They're looking into your contracts. If they find out, Donovan cut him off. They won't find anything. Ariana's heart pounded. Someone tipped off the Attorney General? She smiled to herself. Good. Because this case was no longer just about Elena. This was about taking Donovan down. She turned to head back inside, but suddenly, going somewhere, Ms. Grande? A shiver ran down her spine. Victor Donovan was standing right behind her. She spun around, keeping her face calm. Mr. Donovan. What a surprise. He took a slow step closer, his dark eyes piercing into her. You're making a very dangerous mistake. Ariana folded her arms. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Donovan's lip curled. You think you're smart, don't you? You think just because you passed the bar, you can waltz in here and play lawyer? Ariana tilted her head. So far, I'm doing a pretty good job. His face twitched. You don't win against me, Ariana. You don't embarrass me in court. Do you have any idea who I am? Ariana didn't even blink. A criminal in a fancy suit. His nostrils flared. He leaned in, his voice lowering to a whisper. Walk away. Drop the case. If you don't, you'll regret it. Ariana didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward too, matching his intensity. See, Victor, the thing about threats? She smiled. They only work on people who are scared of you. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, with a frustrated scoff, he turned and walked away. Ariana exhaled, feeling the adrenaline still pumping through her veins. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was war. When court resumed, Donovan was back at the plaintiff's table, his expression unreadable. Ariana rose. Your Honor, I'd like to request an immediate injunction against Donovan Financial, preventing them from collecting on any loans that are under investigation for fraud. The judge adjusted his glasses. That is a serious request, Ms. Grande. Ariana nodded. And I have serious evidence. She turned to the jury. This isn't just about Elena Vasquez. This is about dozens of people who were tricked into signing predatory contracts. She held up a thick folder. I have statements, testimonies, evidence that this company has systematically trapped innocent people into financial ruin. The judge flipped through the folder. His expression hardened. Mr. Donovan, he said sternly, do you have a response? Victor stood slowly, his smirk returning. Your Honor, my company operates within the full boundaries of the law. If some people failed to read their contracts properly, that's not my fault. Ariana's jaw clenched. He was unbelievable. She stepped forward. Then why are you being investigated by the Attorney General's office? The room erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Even the judge seemed momentarily caught off guard. Donovan's eyes darkened. Excuse me. Ariana folded her hands together, tilting her head. Oh, you didn't know? My sources tell me that state prosecutors are looking very closely at your business practices. Victor's fingers curled against the table. For the first time, he looked nervous. Your Honor, Ariana continued, we cannot allow Mr. Donovan to keep exploiting more victims while this investigation is ongoing. I request that all collections from his company be immediately frozen. The judge rubbed his chin. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. Motion granted. Boom. Just like that, Donovan's entire business took a hit. Ariana could see it in his face. The way his jaw locked. The way his nails dug into the table. She had just won the first battle. But this war? It was far from over. Because the second the judge slammed his gavel, Victor Donovan turned his gaze toward Ariana. And this time, there was no smirk. No amusement. Just pure rage. She knew, in that moment, that he wasn't just going to fight her in court. He was going to come after her. And the battle had only just begun. Ariana felt Victor Donovan's burning stare from across the courtroom. His face was cold, his jaw locked. He had just suffered his first major blow. His company's collections were frozen. For the first time in his life, he was on the defensive. But Ariana knew better than to celebrate too early. She had just stepped into the ring with one of the most ruthless businessmen in the country. And men like Donovan, they never lose quietly. The judge banged his gavel. This court is adjourned until tomorrow. We will reconvene at 10 a.m. sharp. Ariana turned to Elena and gave her a reassuring smile. We're winning, she whispered. Elena nodded, but there was fear in her eyes. What if he comes after me? She murmured. Ariana gently squeezed her hand. He won't. He's going to be too busy trying to deal with me. Elena let out a shaky breath. I still can't believe this is happening. You're a pop star. Ariana grinned. Yeah, I get that a lot. Elena shook her head in disbelief. No, I was going to say, you're my hero. Ariana felt a lump rise in her throat. No matter how much fame or money she had, this, helping people like Elena, felt like the most important thing she had ever done. She gave Elena one last reassuring squeeze before gathering her things. But as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Her heart skipped. Something told her she needed to answer this. She swiped the call open and put the phone to her ear. Hello. A low voice, distorted and cold, came through the receiver. You should have walked away. The blood drained from her face. Before she could say anything, the line went dead. Ariana walked briskly through the courthouse parking lot, her heart pounding. The phone call played in her mind over and over again. She knew what this was. A warning. A threat. Victor Donovan wasn't just angry. He was coming for her. As she reached her car, she glanced around. The lot was nearly empty, the sky turning a deep orange as the sun set. She felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She wasn't safe. She pulled out her phone and called her bodyguard, Marcus. Yo, boss, he answered in his usual calm voice. Meet me at my house, she said. Now. Marcus could hear the tension in her voice. Everything okay? Not sure yet. I'm on my way. She ended the call, got into her car, and locked the doors. Then, just as she was about to start the engine, a black SUV pulled up behind her, blocking her in. Her stomach dropped. The SUV's tinted windows didn't roll down. No one stepped out. They were just sitting there, watching her. Ariana's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. This was no coincidence. She reached for her phone again. But before she could dial, the SUV's engine roared to life. And then it sped away, disappearing into the distance. Ariana sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was a warning, a deadly one. And she had no intention of backing down. Ariana sat in her car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The SUV had vanished, but the warning lingered. She wasn't paranoid. She knew what had just happened. Victor Donovan wasn't just fighting her in court. He was trying to scare her. She took a slow breath, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't afford to panic, not now. Instead of driving straight home, she made a quick decision. She turned her car onto a different road, checking her rearview mirror every few seconds. If they were still watching her, she'd know. She took 3 random turns, weaving through downtown traffic, making sure she wasn't being followed. Only when she was certain she was alone did she finally drive toward her house. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Marcus was already there, leaning against his black Range Rover with his arms crossed. He was a mountain of a man, 6'5", solid muscle, and always deadly calm. As Ariana stepped out of her car, he pushed off the SUV and walked toward her. What happened? She told him everything. The phone call, the SUV, the way they just sat there, watching her. Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, he let out a slow breath. Yeah, that was a warning. Ariana nodded. I figured. He glanced around, scanning the area like a human security camera. You're not staying here alone tonight. I'm fine. Marcus gave her a look. No, you're not. We don't know how far Donovan is willing to go. You're either staying at a secure location, or I'm camping out in your living room. Ariana sighed. Fine, but I'm not running from this, Marcus. He smirked. Didn't think you would. They went inside, and Marcus did a full security sweep of the house. He checked the locks, the cameras, and even looked for tracking devices on her car. Nothing. Whoever had sent that warning wasn't trying to attack her, yet. They just wanted to make sure she knew they were watching. And it only made Ariana more determined to take Donovan down. The next morning, Ariana walked into the courthouse like nothing had happened. She wasn't going to let fear show. If Donovan thought he could intimidate her, he was about to be very disappointed. As she took her seat at the defense table, she saw Donovan already waiting, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked calm. Too calm. Ariana smirked at him. Morning, Victor. Sleep well. His lips curled slightly. Like a baby. She leaned in just a fraction. Good. Because you're going to need the rest. His eyes darkened. Before he could respond, the judge entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. Ms. Grande, the judge said, are you ready to proceed? Ariana stood. Yes, Your Honor. And I'd like to call my first witness. The doors opened, and a man walked in. The courtroom whispered in shock. Because this wasn't just any witness. This was John Wallace, a former high-level employee at Donovan Financial. And Ariana had brought him here to testify against his old boss. Victor Donovan's expression didn't change. But Ariana could see the muscle in his jaw twitch. He wasn't expecting this. Good. Because what was about to happen next was going to shake the entire courtroom. John Wallace walked to the witness stand, his face pale but determined. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and nervous eyes, like someone who had spent years looking over his shoulder. As he raised his hand to be sworn in, Ariana stole a glance at Victor Donovan. The billionaire's jaw was locked. His fingers tapped against the table in slow, measured beats. He was furious, and he was trying very hard not to show it. The judge turned to Ariana. Ms. Grande, you may proceed with your questioning. Ariana stepped forward. She took her time, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the tension unbearable. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Wallace, she said, her voice clear and steady. Can you please tell the court what your position was at Donovan Financial? Wallace cleared his throat. I was the head of risk management. Ariana nodded. And what did that job entail? Wallace shifted in his seat. I analyzed loan contracts. I assessed the risk level of borrowers. I also, he hesitated, helped develop certain strategies to maximize company profits. Ariana raised an eyebrow. Strategies? Wallace swallowed hard. He avoided looking at Victor Donovan. Yes, we had methods to ensure that clients remained in debt for as long as possible. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ariana kept her expression neutral, but inside, she knew this was a goldmine. She took a step closer. Mr. Wallace, are you saying that Donovan Financial intentionally trapped people in endless debt? Wallace hesitated. He was scared. She could see it in his eyes. But then he did something surprising. He turned his head, just slightly, toward the gallery, where a woman was sitting with her young daughter, Elena Vasquez and little Lucia. Wallace exhaled. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yes, he said. That's exactly what we did. The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Even the jury looked stunned. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Order. Ariana barely heard him. She was watching Donovan. For the first time, the billionaire didn't look smug. He looked like a man who had just realized his fortress wasn't as indestructible as he thought. Ariana turned back to Wallace. Mr. Wallace, can you give the court an example of how Donovan Financial trapped borrowers? Wallace nodded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. This, he said, contains internal emails, memos, evidence that Donovan Financial targeted single mothers, elderly individuals, and low-income families, because they were the least likely to fight back. Ariana's stomach clenched. She had known this company was corrupt. But this was pure evil. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to submit this USB as evidence. The judge motioned for the bailiff to retrieve it. The court will review the contents. Victor Donovan stood up abruptly. Your Honor, I object. This is a blatant attack against my company. This so-called witness is a disgruntled former employee who was fired for incompetence. Wallace's face turned red. I quit because I couldn't stand being part of a scam. Donovan's eyes burned with fury. This is hearsay. Ariana stepped forward. Actually, Your Honor, this is direct evidence. The emails in this USB came from Donovan Financial's own servers. We can verify them. The judge looked at the USB in his hands. He let out a slow sigh. This court will take a recess while I review this evidence. Bang! The gavel slammed down. But Ariana wasn't celebrating yet. Because Victor Donovan wasn't just going to sit back and lose. And she was right. Because just as the judge walked out, Victor Donovan leaned toward her and whispered, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then, he turned and walked out of the courtroom. Ariana's stomach twisted. She wasn't afraid of him. But something told her. The real fight was just beginning. Ariana stood frozen for a moment, Victor Donovan's words ringing in her ears. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The courtroom buzzed with energy as people whispered about what had just happened. The jury looked shaken. Even the prosecutor, who had spent most of the trial smirking, was now fidgeting with his pen. Ariana took a steadying breath and turned to Elena, who clutched her daughter's hand. "Are you okay?" Ariana asked softly. Elena nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. "What happens now?" Ariana gave her a reassuring smile. "Now, we wait for the judge to review the evidence." But deep down, she knew waiting wasn't an option. Because Victor Donovan wasn't the kind of man to wait for a verdict. He was the kind of man to make one. As Ariana stepped out of the courthouse, Marcus was already waiting for her, his arms crossed. "We need to talk," he said in a low voice. Ariana sighed. "Let me guess. Donovan's already making moves." Marcus clenched his jaw. "He's way ahead of you." He gestured toward a black car parked across the street. Ariana's stomach dropped. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a woman in a sharp navy blue suit. She had sleek black hair, a cold expression, and piercing blue eyes. Ariana recognized her instantly. Catherine Sinclair, Victor Donovan's personal attorney, and one of the most ruthless legal minds in the country. The woman stepped out of the car and strode toward them, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Ariana Grande," she said smoothly, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Ariana didn't take it. "Can't say the feeling's mutual." Catherine smirked. "Oh, I like you. Shame this won't end well for you." Ariana crossed her arms. "Is that a threat?" Catherine tilted her head. "More like a guarantee." Marcus stepped forward, his broad frame blocking Ariana slightly. "If you have something to say, say it." Catherine ignored him, keeping her icy gaze locked on Ariana. "Victor wants to make you an offer." Ariana raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Drop the case, and he won't ruin my life." Catherine smiled. "Smart girl." Ariana took a step closer. "Tell Victor that if he's scared, he should just say so." Catherine chuckled. "Oh, he's not scared. He's bored." This was supposed to be an easy case. But now, it's becoming a problem. And Victor doesn't do problems. Ariana kept her voice steady. "Then he's going to hate what happens next." Catherine's smirk faded just slightly. Ariana leaned in. "Because I'm not just going to win this case. I'm going to destroy him." Catherine's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Annoyance? Amusement? Then, she pulled something from her bag and handed it to Ariana. A manila envelope. Ariana took it warily and opened it. Her breath caught. Inside were photos. Of her. Walking into the courthouse. Leaving her house. Even sitting in a cafe the night before. They had been watching her. Catherine leaned in and whispered, "Are you sure you want to play this game?" Ariana's grip on the photos tightened. Then, slowly, she looked up and smiled. "I love this game." Catherine studied her for a moment, then let out a small, humorless laugh. "Suit yourself." She turned, walked back to her car, and disappeared into the city streets. Marcus exhaled sharply. "This is getting dangerous, Ari." Ariana stared down at the photos. It was dangerous, but she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Ariana sat in her car, gripping the stack of photos with one hand, her mind racing. Victor Donovan wasn't just watching her. He was tracking her, studying her every move. This wasn't a courtroom battle anymore. This was war. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, rubbing his jaw. "We need to take this seriously, Ariana. These guys don't play fair." Ariana exhaled, setting the photos on the dashboard. "They think they can scare me into dropping this case." She looked out the window, jaw clenched. "They're wrong." Marcus glanced at her. "What's the move?" Ariana's eyes darkened. We go on offense. That night, Ariana met with her team at a secure, undisclosed location, a sleek, modern office space her legal consultant had arranged. The room was filled with papers, laptop screens, and case files. Seated at the long conference table was her war room. There was Marcus, standing near the door like a human shield. Elena Vasquez, her hands nervously clasped together. And Nate Parker, a tech expert Ariana had hired to help with the case. All right, Ariana said, placing the photos on the table. They're watching me. We expected that. Nate adjusted his glasses. Yeah, but they're getting bolder. You don't just leave a threat like this unless you're trying to push someone into a decision. Ariana smirked. Well, let's push back. Nate raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Ariana slid a USB drive across the table. John Wallace's files. I want to leak just enough to the press to make Victor sweat. Nothing that could compromise the case. Just something to put the pressure on. Elena's eyes widened. You're taking this public? Ariana nodded. Donovan thrives in the shadows. We drag him into the light. Marcus let out a low whistle. Bold. Ariana smirked. That's kind of my thing. Nate plugged the USB into his laptop. Within seconds, he was scrolling through documents, scanning emails, and searching for the perfect information to release. There, he said, clicking on a file. This email is from Donovan's own legal team admitting that some of the contract clauses could be considered fraudulent if properly challenged in court. Ariana leaned over his shoulder. The email was clear as day. It was the crack she needed. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. A journalist picked up on the second ring. This is Ariana Grande. I have something you might want to see. The next morning, the headline was everywhere. Exposed. Internal emails suggest Victor Donovan's loan practices are unlawful. Social media exploded. News channels picked up the story. And Victor Donovan? He was furious. By the time Ariana arrived at the courthouse, the media was already swarming the building. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus kept close, making sure no one got too aggressive. Then, from the corner of her eye, Ariana saw him. Victor Donovan. He was standing on the courthouse steps, dressed in a perfect, custom-tailored suit. But his eyes? His eyes were burning with rage. Ariana walked straight toward him. He took a step forward, leaning down just enough so only she could hear him. You have no idea what you just did. Ariana tilted her head. Oh, I think I do. Victor let out a low, dangerous chuckle. You think you've won something? Ariana met his gaze, unwavering. No, Victor. I think you've already lost. His jaw clenched. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed into the courthouse. Marcus leaned in. I think you just broke him. Ariana smiled. Good. But deep down, she knew. Victor Donovan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The moment Ariana stepped into the courtroom, she felt the shift in energy. Victor Donovan wasn't just angry anymore. He was desperate. And desperate men did dangerous things. She took her seat at the defense table, her eyes flicking toward Donovan. He sat stiffly, his lawyer, Catherine Sinclair, whispering something in his ear. He didn't look at Ariana. He didn't have to. Because the moment the judge walked in and the session began, she knew something was wrong. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I have been made aware of a serious development in this case. Ariana's stomach clenched. The judge picked up a document. The plaintiff, Mr. Donovan, has filed a motion to have Ms. Grande removed as defense counsel. Ariana's blood ran cold. She turned sharply to Donovan, who finally looked at her. And the smirk was back. Catherine Sinclair stood. Your Honor, it is clear that Ms. Grande is using this trial for her own personal and professional gain. She is not an experienced attorney. She is a celebrity playing dress-up. She has also engaged in unethical behavior by leaking confidential information to the press. The courtroom gasped. Ariana stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Your Honor, the information that was leaked was not confidential, she said, her voice sharp. It was an email from Donovan's legal team discussing illegal practices. The public has a right to know. Catherine gave a knowing smile. Regardless, Your Honor, this proves Ms. Grande's recklessness. The defense deserves proper legal representation, not a pop star seeking revenge. Ariana's fists clenched. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have every legal right to represent my client. I am licensed, I am qualified, and she shot a glare at Donovan, I am winning. The judge sighed. He looked at both parties, clearly weighing his decision. For a moment, the entire courtroom held its breath. Then, motion denied. The room erupted. Ariana grinned. Catherine Sinclair? She barely reacted. Because this motion wasn't their real plan. And Ariana realized it too late. Because the second the judge banged his gavel, Donovan stood and calmly said, Your Honor, I have one more request. The judge sighed. Go ahead, Mr. Donovan. Victor adjusted his cuffs. Then, with a sickening smile, he said, I would like to countersue Ms. Grande for defamation and unlawful interference in my business. Ariana's heart stopped. The entire courtroom exploded into chaos. Shouts. Gasps. Elena Vasquez turned to Ariana, her face pale. He can't do that, right? Ariana didn't answer. Because she knew. Oh, he absolutely could. And he just did. The courtroom was a storm of chaos. Gasps, murmurs, reporters scrambling to take notes. Ariana felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. But she didn't let it show. She turned to Victor Donovan, who sat smugly at his table, fingers intertwined like a man who had just checkmated his opponent. Ariana? She wasn't checkmated. She was just getting started. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Order. The noise settled, but the tension didn't. The judge turned to Donovan, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Donovan, you are requesting to countersue Ms. Grande for defamation and unlawful interference in your business? Victor nodded, his expression carefully controlled. That's correct, Your Honor. Ms. Grande's reckless public statements and unauthorized leaks have caused financial harm to my company and damaged my reputation. Ariana almost laughed. His reputation? The man had built an empire on ruining people, and now he was playing the victim? The judge sighed. Ms. Grande, do you have a response? Ariana stood, smoothing her blazer. Yes, Your Honor. She turned to face the jury, then to the packed courtroom. This countersuit, she said, her voice clear, steady, is nothing more than an intimidation tactic. She gestured toward Donovan. Victor Donovan knows his case is falling apart. He knows that we have evidence of his fraudulent lending practices. And because he can't beat me in court, he's trying to silence me. Donovan's lawyer, Catherine Sinclair, stood. Objection. Argumentative. The judge nodded. Sustained. Ms. Grande, keep it factual. Ariana took a breath. Fact. She continued, keeping her tone calm. Victor Donovan's company is currently under investigation for illegal lending practices. Fact. My team has emails from his own legal department admitting to unethical contracts. Fact. His business model depends on keeping innocent people trapped in endless debt. She turned to Donovan directly. And now he wants to sue me? For telling the truth. She let the words hang in the air. The courtroom was silent. The judge leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Mr. Donovan, he said, his voice thoughtful. If Ms. Grande's claims are true, this could be considered a strategic lawsuit meant to suppress her defense. Victor smiled smoothly. Or, Your Honor, it could be a response to her reckless and unlawful interference in a legitimate business. The judge sighed. He didn't like this. But Donovan had power, and power made things complicated. Finally, the judge spoke. I will allow the countersuit to proceed, but I expect solid evidence from both sides. This trial will not be used for personal vendettas. Bang! The gavel slammed down. The moment it did, Donovan turned to Ariana, leaned slightly forward, and whispered, Now you're in my game. Ariana smiled sweetly. She whispered back, Then you're going to hate losing. Later that evening, Ariana sat in her secure office, staring at the wall of evidence they had gathered so far. Emails, testimonies, internal memos from Donovan Financial. She had enough to bury him. But now, she had to fight two battles at once. 1. Defending Elena Vasquez. 2. Defending herself. Marcus leaned against the desk, arms crossed. This is a trap, Ari. Ariana nodded. I know. He wants to distract you. Drag you into a legal mess. Keep you so busy defending yourself that you stop going after him. Ariana sighed. I know. Marcus sat down across from her, lowering his voice. Are you sure you want to do this? Ariana met his eyes. Marcus, she said softly. If we win this case, we don't just save Elena. We save hundreds of people just like her. Marcus studied her. Then he smirked. Damn, you really are a lawyer now. Ariana grinned. Guess so. She reached for her phone and dialed a number. A journalist picked up. Ms. Grande. Ariana took a deep breath. I have another story for you. Because if Victor Donovan wanted a war, then Ariana was bringing the whole battlefield to him. The next morning, Ariana woke up to exactly what she wanted. The headlines were everywhere. Victor Donovan sues Ariana Grande after explosive courtroom battle. But is he hiding something? New evidence suggests Donovan Financial's loan practices are under criminal investigation. Ariana Grande fights back. Sources say she has enough to destroy Donovan Financial. The media loved the story. A billionaire trying to silence a pop star turned lawyer? It was too good. And now, the entire world was watching. Ariana smirked as she sipped her coffee. Victor Donovan had money, power, but she had something better. She had attention, and attention could turn public opinion against him fast. She set her coffee down and picked up her phone. A new message flashed on her screen. Unknown number. You think this is a game? Ariana stared at the text. Then, another one popped up. Unknown number. Walk away. While you still can. Her jaw tightened. She typed back. Me or what? No response. Ariana let out a slow breath, setting her phone down. She was getting under Donovan's skin. Good. But she needed to hit him harder. She pulled up her laptop and called Nate, her tech expert. Nate, she said the second he picked up. I need you to dig deeper into Donovan's business records. Nate yawned. Ariana, do you sleep? She ignored that. Look for shell companies. Offshore accounts. Anything that ties him to criminal activity. Nate rubbed his eyes. You think there's something shady? Ariana smirked. I know there is. Nate sighed. All right, I'll see what I can find. Ariana leaned back. She didn't just want to win this trial. She wanted to bury Victor Donovan. Hours later, Ariana walked into the courthouse, the media swarming her. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Ariana, do you have a response to the countersuit? Is Victor Donovan afraid of losing? Do you think you'll win? Ariana stopped, turned to the cameras, and smiled. I know I'll win. Then she walked inside. Victor Donovan was already seated, waiting for her. He looked calm. Too calm. Ariana sat at her table. Marcus leaned over. Something's off, he whispered. Before Ariana could respond, the judge entered and called the court to order. Ms. Grande, the judge said, we will now proceed with the countersuit. Ariana stood. Your Honor, this suit is nothing more than an attempt to silence me. Mr. Donovan knows he's losing, so he's trying to bury me in legal fees and distractions. Catherine Sinclair, Donovan's lawyer, smirked. Your Honor, she said, Ms. Grande is a public figure who has recklessly accused my client of crimes without concrete proof. Her actions have caused financial harm and irreparable damage to my client's reputation. Ariana smirked right back. If his own company's emails aren't proof, I don't know what is. The judge sighed. I will allow both parties to present evidence. Ariana nodded. Then, suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. A man in a suit rushed inside and handed a sealed folder to Catherine Sinclair. She opened it. Read it. And her smirk vanished. She leaned toward Donovan, whispering urgently. Ariana frowned. What was happening? Then, Catherine stood. Your Honor, my client requests a recess. Ariana raised an eyebrow. Nervous, Mr. Donovan? Donovan shot her a glare. The judge hesitated. We just began. Catherine cleared her throat. New information has come to light. We need time to discuss. The judge sighed. Fine. Court will resume in 30 minutes. Bang. The gavel came down. As soon as the judge left, Donovan stood up and stormed out. Ariana watched him go. Then, she turned to Marcus. I need to know what's in that folder. Marcus nodded. I'm on it. Because something had shaken Victor Donovan. And Ariana was about to find out what. Ariana waited for what felt like hours. Her mind raced with possibilities. What could possibly be in that folder that made Victor Donovan, the man who controlled everything, so rattled? She glanced at Marcus, who was pacing in the hallway just outside the courtroom. The recess had been called, and everyone had left for a brief break. But Ariana knew that something big was coming. As soon as the doors opened again, Marcus walked in with a manila envelope in his hand. What did you find? Ariana asked, her voice low but urgent. Marcus handed her the envelope, his face serious. You're not going to believe this, but... Ariana quickly opened the envelope and unfolded the papers inside. Her eyes scanned the document. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a contract, signed by none other than Victor Donovan himself. But it wasn't just any contract. It was a payment agreement between Donovan Financial and several shell companies. The companies were registered in offshore tax havens. The contract detailed massive bribes to government officials and judges. There were payoffs to cover up fraudulent loan schemes. There were illegal actions, clear illegal actions, designed to keep Donovan's empire running, all at the cost of innocent people. Her fingers trembled as she held the contract in her hands. Victor Donovan had been running a criminal organization right under everyone's noses, and the evidence was irrefutable. She looked up at Marcus. "This is it." He nodded. "This is the smoking gun." Ariana didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and immediately dialed her contact at the Attorney General's office. "This is Ariana Grande," she said, her voice steady but intense. "I need to speak to someone who can act on this right now." Within minutes, the Attorney General's office was reviewing the contract, and the legal teams began working together to investigate the documents further. It was time to turn the tide. By the time court reconvened, the atmosphere was completely different. Victor Donovan walked in, his face pale, his confidence gone. Catherine Sinclair looked around nervously as the door closed behind them. The judge called the session to order, and Ariana stood up. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding with a combination of excitement and a sense of justice she hadn't felt in years. "Your Honor," Ariana began, holding up the contract for the judge to see. "I have just received additional evidence that proves Mr. Donovan's criminal activities." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Victor Donovan's face paled further as Ariana handed over the contract. "I present this as proof of bribery, money laundering, and illegal financial practices. This is not just about unethical lending anymore. This is about criminal activity." The judge's eyes widened as he flipped through the document. The jury watched, stunned, as the judge's expression grew darker with each page. Victor Donovan remained motionless, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Ariana continued, "And, Your Honor, I am requesting that the Attorney General's office be given access to these documents for further investigation. This court can no longer ignore the criminal empire that Mr. Donovan has built." The room fell silent. Catherine Sinclair stood up, trying to protest, but her words were barely audible over the sound of the court's growing disbelief. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Donovan, do you have any response to these allegations?" Victor Donovan swallowed hard, his mouth dry. He glanced briefly at Catherine, who looked completely defeated. Then, finally, Donovan spoke. His voice, once so confident and forceful, was now strained. I deny these claims." But Ariana wasn't listening anymore, because at that moment, the doors of the courtroom burst open. A team of FBI agents entered, each holding a set of documents and wearing the kind of serious expressions that signaled everything was about to change. The courtroom was still, and then the lead agent spoke. "Victor Donovan, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and a number of other charges related to your illegal business practices." Ariana's heart raced as she watched the agents approach Donovan, his chair scraping back as they handcuffed him. The room was silent. Ariana felt like she could finally breathe. After years of Victor Donovan ruining lives, after months of fighting back, this was it. This was the victory she had been fighting for. The jury remained motionless as the agents led Donovan out of the courtroom. Catherine Sinclair followed in stunned silence, and the press erupted into a frenzy outside. But Ariana didn't care about the media. She only cared about the people she had helped. Elena stood up from her seat, her eyes wide. "Is it over? Did we win?" Ariana smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and triumph. "It's over. He's finished." Elena hugged her. "You did it. You really did it." Ariana hugged her back. "We did it." And for the first time in months, Ariana felt like she could finally let go of the weight she had carried for so long. She had brought down the man who had destroyed so many lives. She had fought for justice and won. And as she stood there, surrounded by people who believed in her, Ariana knew that this fight had been about more than just one case. It had been about fighting for everyone who had ever been wronged. And that, more than anything, was worth it.